Alright, I came out and I torqued down the intake bolts. I put them at 25 pounds. And I just did like a U pattern. I started over there, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I went 5, 6, 7, 8. And then went to the very out, 9, 10, 11, 12. And it was really hard to get a torque wrench in there. It was impossible to get a torque wrench in there. So I just guesstimated on those, but I'm pretty sure I got it really close. So today we're going to strap a distributor. And a lot of people ask, you know, how do you know when to get it to point at number 1? Now, there's a couple different ways you can do this. But now, you can have someone crank the car over and put your finger over the number 1 spark plug. That's the number 1 cylinder. That's the driver's side. 1, 3, 5, 7. Remember, you can put your finger over there, have someone bump it over, and it'll go. Psh! You're on the compression stroke right there. But now, if you think, here's a piston on this side. It's a 4-stroke engine. So you got the intake valve opens and it pulls down. It sucks the air fuel mixture in. Okay, the intake valve closes, it comes up. Boom, that's your power stroke. That's where we want to be on top dead center. It fires, then compression, intake, compression, then it fires power, and then the exhaust valve opens, it pushes it out, and then intake again all over. So intake, once it sucks in the intake, it comes up for the compression stroke, and then boom, power, and then it hits it ignites the plug, ignites the air fuel ratio, and slams the piston back down. And that's where we intake compression, and we're at the very top. That's where we want it to be. So an easy way to figure that out is, again, looking at our rocker arms. Just like when we're setting the valves. The exhaust opens, closes. As it's closing, the intake opens and it closes. Once it closes, that means the piston's on the bottom, and it's going to start coming up to compress all that. So once this intake closes, remember, match the intake valves, number 1. Once it closes, then we can turn our pointer around, our balancer. We can turn the motor over until we're on 0, and that puts us at top dead center. So you got to watch though, because you can be on top dead center twice down here. One time will be for the number 1 cylinder, and one time will be for the number 6 cylinder, because there's 4 strokes. That crank's got to turn twice to complete the whole intake, compression, power, exhaust thing. So, but if we let this intake close, then we know the next time we turn it over clockwise, the next time we come back to 0, that's going to be top dead center for this one, because that's where the intake valve closed at. So that's where we're going to put it. And then I can already see the intake valve starting to come up. So once it goes down, then I'll turn it over until, actually I'm going to put the 0 mark on about 34 degrees. And that's where I'm going to put it. And then I'm going to stab the distributor. You have to take the cap off the distributor. I'm going to stab the distributor in such a manner that the rotor, right here, this part right where my thumb's at, is going to be pointing right at the number 1 cylinder. Now, you don't have to have that point at the number 1 distributor, but now if you're using like factory length plug wires, they're made in that manner. So if it ain't pointing at number 1 and you just start it wherever, your plug wires might not be long enough. But because when you're on top dead center, wherever this is pointing is where you got to put the number 1 spark plug on the cap. So say it's pointing that way when we stab it. Whoop. I'm dropping everything. Just say it's pointing that way when we stab it. And I put the cap on like this, then our number one spark plug would have to go where my thumb's at. But we want to stab it to where, and you can just go from there and clockwise with your spark plug wires. Spark plug 1 to 8, the firing order 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. But if you do this correctly, especially if you got like an HEI and stock plug wires, if you don't do it this way, your plug wires are not going to reach, and that big canister over here is going to get in the way when you try to set the timing. Could possibly be in the wrong spot to where if you try to turn the distributor, it's not going to turn enough to get where your timing needs to be. So do it correct. Just do it the way GM intended it to be. Make sure you got your new gasket on there. You're supposed to leave this up, but there's already oil in the intake. And, well, I'm going to leave that up a little bit. You know, I leave my gasket up, just with a little bit of oil. I put petroleum jelly on there. But now let's turn it over. Intake valve opens, closes, and then we turn it back to where I'm going to put it at 34 degrees. Alright, so the intake valve opened and closed. And then I turned it around to as soon as I was on my timing. You can put this at 0, but that black mark on the timing tab is 0. And then what we got there, 60, 50, 40, 30, it's on about 31. Close enough. Now, we're going to stab our distributor where the rotor is pointing right at number 1. There we go. Make sure we got our gasket on there. And just drop it right down in the hole. There's like 8 different ways this thing will go in, but it'll only hit that oil pump drive gear. Look at that. It went all the way down. It'll only hit that oil pump drive gear 2 different ways. I actually didn't want it to go down, just so I could show you something, but sometimes it don't go all the way down, and when you do that, you got to turn the motor over. If you just turn the motor over, eventually it'll fall down, and sometimes it does good for someone to just put some light pressure right here. But as it goes down, the rotor is going to spin clockwise a little bit. So if you have to turn it to get that to happen, then do your intake closes, opens, closes, put it back on the time mark thing again, and see where you're at. You might have to move it a tooth. We might have to move it a tooth there. I'm just looking from this side. But so we're about right there. That's where we want to be. So here's the number 1 cylinder right there. And that's where the rotor is pointing at. It's pointing right at us right here. Just right behind that carburetor. So that's where we want it. And that might not be perfect the first time. It might be a little bit off. So, I mean, I'm going to put it like that. And then if it is a little bit off, well, we might have to move it a tooth here or there. But now, when we put the cap on, just keep in mind where that rotor's pointing. It's pointing that way. So we need to start our spark plug number 1. That's not where the cap goes on. It don't matter if you move this or not. The rotor's going to stay still. All right, so we're going to put our number 1 right here where the rotor was pointing. That's where we're going to put it. So I have to bolt this down. So just to interrupt here real quick, that's something I forgot to mention. When you turn this thing, when you turn the distributor clockwise, it takes timing out of it. So say you're at 40 degrees, you want it to come down to 30, you turn it clockwise. Now if you're at 30 and you want to be at 38, then you turn it counterclockwise. Now if our plug wires, your plug wire lengths will only let you turn it so far, and with HEI, the canister will only let you turn it so far. Now if you can't, from where you're at, where you got it at, if you can't turn it enough to get the timing where you're at, then you'll have to raise the distributor up and move it a tooth one way or the other. That's the way it's made. So spark plug 1, and then it goes clockwise: 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, and 2. And that's how you run your plugs to the cap, since that's number 1. All right, I went ahead and put the cap on. And again, if that distributor don't drop all the way down on you like it did me, turn the motor over and it'll drop down. Like I said, that rotor will turn clockwise as it drops down. So keep that in mind as you're stabbing it and it's not going all the way down. Turn it counterclockwise a little bit, pointing at like number 3. And then that way when it drops down, it'll be pointing at number 1. But when it drops down, do the thing like I mentioned earlier and put yourself back on top dead center and make sure that rotor's pointing at 1. If not, you might have to pull it back out of there and move it a tooth and do it, rinse and repeat until you get that pointing at number 1 with it on top dead center. Now that we have that, we can go ahead and put our hold down tab back on, and you hold down bolt. You hold down tab and you hold down bolt. It goes like that. That side goes down. So I'll go ahead and put that on there. All right. It got cold on me last night, so I went inside. I got the hold down tab on. I got it tight. I just got it snug to where the motor, when the motor runs, it won't turn the distributor, but tight enough I can move it by hand. Because we are going to need to move that a little bit to get the timing just right. So now our rotor was pointing right here. So we need that one, and we're on top dead center on number 1. Number 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8 on the other side. So we run that one that the rotor was pointing to. See, let's go back a little. Oh, I got it a little tighter than I thought it did. Anyway, we run this one the rotor was pointing to plug number 1. We'll run this one to 8. We'll run this one to 4. Second one back. 3, 6, 5, 7, and 2. Like I've already got this side run. That one's going to number 1. That one's going to number 3. And this one's going to number 5, or 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, and 7. Wait, I got messed up somewhere. 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. Well, I'm glad I rechecked that. That one's number 5. That one's number 7. Well, I got these all mixed up because these are marked. Somehow I got those mixed up. So that's 5. I got that all backwards. All right. So that one's number 1. That's where our rotor was pointing. 8, 4, 3. Yep, that one's 3. 6, 5. Yep, there it is. 5. And then 7. And then 2. I had it messed up. I'm glad I double checked it. And these spark plug wires Chris bought, they're marked down here too. So here's plug wire number one. This one should be 3, but the I keep smelling like glue over here for some reason. I don't know where that's coming from. Yep, 3. And then 5. And then, of course, that would have to leave this one being 7. Yep, so just like that. Wherever the rotor's pointing, start with 1. 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. Now, if the rotor was pointing back here, that's where we'd start 1 and we'd go clockwise. 1, 8, 4, etc. But if you do that and you got factory length plug wires, they're not going to reach, and one's not going to reach, or some of them's not going to reach, and then some will be so tight you can't turn the distributor. So do it the correct way. Point number 1 at the number 1 cylinder, and then start your number 1 right there. 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. And again, that's the driver's side. 1, 3, 5, 7. Passenger side. 2, 4, 6, 8. And once you get all your spark plugs on there and everything's back together, you can go ahead and try to start it. Put your timing light on here and look down here. And as you try to start it, you should be able to see, based on the timing light, where it's at. Most like stock vehicles, they like 8 to 12 at idle. Bigger cams, they usually like 18 to 22 at idle. And then this one's locked out, so we just put it where it runs best at wide open throttle, which is 34. But now, once you get it started and get it running, then rev it up to about 3,000 RPM and set it, I don't know, around 36 degrees. Most small block Chevys are going to like 32 to 38 degrees. So put it between 34 to 36, and then until you can make some pulls and read your plugs or get on a dyno and see what it likes the best. But also, like if you're running like an HEI with a big cam, they like to idle around 20 degrees, and they've got like a 20 degree curve in them, so that puts you at 40 degrees. So then you have to start recurving your distributor and stuff like that, and you really can't do that with an HEI. But that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, that should get you close and should get you started up. If it doesn't, a few little movements of the distributor should get you there. But yeah, if you have any questions, hit the comments. And just like that, I'm not going to wire in the other side just yet, because we had everything running to the back of this alternator, and it's not a good idea to stack a bunch of stuff on something like that. So I got a power block. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to put it. But the transmission in this car, it's the transmission in this car, we're going to take it out and put it in Austin's car. Austin's should be over here in a little bit, so he's going to get the turbo 350, and then we're going to put that transmission in the Trans Am with a trans brake. And then I'm going to have to figure out how to make the trans brake come on with a relay, how to make the trans brake come on without the nitrous coming on. So I'll just have to figure out how to do that. I'll probably have to run a couple of relays to be able to do both of those. But probably the next video is going to be, I'm going to button up some more of this. Just put the throttle linkage on. Probably plug the distributor that goes to the ignition box. I'll probably plug that back in. Put the solenoids back on and all the fuel lines back on. I might put some water in it. When you put water in one of these where the water's drained out of the block, don't just put water in the radiator, because it's not going to fill up the block. the block will get hot, but the hot water won't make it up to the thermostat. Thermostat won't open, it won't flow, and you'll wonder why your car is overheating. So I'm gonna probably undo one of these fittings right here that go to the back and just hold it up and fill the block up until it starts coming out, and then fill the radiator up, put some water in it, and put all that in there. But I'm gonna leave all this undone for now until I can figure out the best way to run that power block. We're gonna run a plier block. We're gonna put it in here somewhere on the firewall down here somewhere, and pretty up all these wires, and I'm gonna run the battery straight to the power block on one side, and then I'm gonna run one side to the alternator, and then of course one side has to go to the starter, and then we can run the fuel pump for the nitrous and the solenoids and all that other stuff to the power block rather than the back of the alternator. But yeah, that's what we got planned. So y'all like and subscribe and keep around. Hopefully we're going to do some no prep races on this thing next year. I'm going to do index and bracket racing on my car next year, and then hopefully the end goal on this one is to turbocharge it and turn up the boost and see how long this factory 4-bolt main block will last and under a bunch of power. That's the end goal. But y'all have a good one.